Families, a problem for the ego. Ever since we got over rutting for the sake of it, we've seen the benefits of being together. A lone wolf versus a pack of wolves. Cooperation has become second nature. The security of family has also become self-evident. No migrant workers to enslave? Then have lots of children and use them as your workforce. It's all very well ranging far and wide, raping and pillaging as you go, but we all know how nice it is to get home to a hot bath and a comfy bed and snuggle up next to our favourite wife. At some stage, some jealous wife somewhere had enough power to stop her husband's worst tendencies, so monogamy became the trend, leading to what we recognise as the family unit these days. Even this unit is evolving and morphing before our eyes as the worst aspects of the 70s and 80s roll through. Selfishness leading to an inflated sense of self. There are so many young people being raised in a one-parent setting that any stigma from the 1950s is now gone, and it's become the choice in many cases, rather than having that thrust quite literally upon one. The family unit, be it single or plural, has changed too. Once, because we had A, a heart, and B, no choice, we used to look after our old folk. These days, economics and opportunity have split the tightly knit family apart and left many of our older people marooned deep in the countryside, while the children desperately fight for survival in overpopulated cities. The family unit itself has never been a watertight compact either. Can I just draw your attention to the case of Cain versus Abel? The children of a well-known couple, Adam and Eve, Cain a farmer, and Abel raised sheep. They made an offering to their grandfather, God, who was clearly a full-on carnivore and chose to favour Abel. I'm sorry, vegetarians, but it's clear what God thinks of tofu sausages and bacon. This, of course, upset Cain, who decided that the only course of action, was to kill his brother. Get that? Kill his brother. This is quite obviously the first family we've had, and they're already up to 50% fratricide rates. Not a good start or omen, in my opinion. It seems that rather than trash the whole experiment, God allowed this bloodthirsty fiend to go on and become the father of a whole race, based in the land of Nod. There's a hidden message in that story as well. The one hidden message, there's about 1,000 to be fair. However, I find it interesting that Jonathan Swift and then Robert Louis Stevenson in A Child's Garden of Verse both refer to going to sleep as going to the land of Nod, quite literally nodding off. It's clear that since Abel's demise, we have been asleep as a race. Very few of us have ever woken up to see the reality of our world. Family is not a guarantee of friendship or kindness. The old joke goes, at least you can choose your own friends. We used to rub along in an accepted hierarchy. Firstborn get the lot. Other children have to find their own way. And that's the way the world works. Then most people accept their lot and get on with it. Fratricide levels plunged, but certainly never stopped. We're now down to 0.001% fratricide rates. Figures officially provided by absolutely no one. Generally, we're better at not killing one another. Instead, we have football. It provides the perfect tribal outlet for those who wish to shake their fists, shout rude words, and occasionally fight each other. Back in the 1950s, we still had the two R's holding society together: respect and religion. Respect was something that you earned, generally by fighting in a war. even if you were the quartermaster in a shed in Woking rather than actually being shot at. You made good, bought your own semi for £15, you'd clothed and fed a wife and 2.5 children and rarely kicked the family Labrador. Everybody got a present at Christmas time and a trip to the seaside for 2 weeks in the summer. You deserved the respect your wife and family gave you for being a decent provider. The social bond of religion held you to account. Don't steal from your work or from your neighbours. Don't cheat on your wife or the taxman. And clearly we'd already got way past the whole don't slaughter your brother even if he's got vegetarian tendencies. Mostly everybody interacted with the church at some level. It's no different to Mao's China of the 1950s. Everybody was apt to inform on their neighbours. It was just called gossip rather than informing, but it amounted to the same thing. If you didn't want everybody to be talking about you behind your back, you'd better play a clean family game. Reagan and Thatcher let the genie out of the bottle. Their key message was, greed is good. You can have whatever you want, whenever you want, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 364 days a year, just leaving one reserved for celebrating carnivores and murderers. This kind of thinking was supposed to apply to businesses and stocks and shares. In reality, if your local bus driver was being encouraged to turn into the Wolf of Wall Street, then it's not a hard leap to see that it signalled the end of common decency. It's always been clear that God has been something of a mixed bag. If your opinion is that he is totally real, that he is your father figure, then he has repeatedly disappointed and downright ended many of his faithful, making him look somewhat mercurial. If you believe that we are the actors in a fantastic play and that as we go along the universe learns more and more about itself, like a toddler exploring its world, then you see that none of this needs to make sense anyway. It rather lets God off the hook. It makes the bitter blows of life much more acceptable somehow. The value of life will go up as well as down. Please see terms and conditions. Written absolutely nowhere. The upshot being that people started to question the societal value of this tenuous control mechanism and asked for something a little more real and a bit more free. Well, the more freedom we've been offered, the more we've taken. Have you ever tried to offer ice cream to a 3-year-old who's just eaten a full meal of nuggets and chips? Would you ever expect them to say no? No. They just take and say yes and allow you to feed them until they vomit all over you and the restaurant. This is a real life example. You know who you are. We all behave like children. We play nicely for a little while, then we want more and more and more until tears before the land of Nod. We generally need some guidelines. If you don't believe me, check the worst excesses of various dictators, Noriega, Hussein, Marcos, to name but a few. Look at the resources of our planet running amazingly low, and yet we take like 3-year-olds stuffing in the ice cream. The young rebel against the old. It's a fact of life. We feel obliged to stretch our muscles and test our strength against our seniors in every walk of life. The truth is that respect kept us from going too far. Now the young have technology on their side. The old have become irrelevant. They breeze by us in a flurry of ones and twos. Now we are marooned in another part of the countryside, nowhere close to our parents and fast becoming the new forgotten. There was some figure in the UK that stated Up to the 1950s, 95% of all children never moved more than 15 miles away from home. Statistics correct at the time of publishing and supplied by absolutely nobody. Now, the nuclear family has quite literally exploded and the debris scattered across the earth. People have to make new plans. More broken families find that rearranging themselves for financial reasons, for emotional reasons, and for comfort and convenience is actually a good way forward. There's more a sense of tribalism returning. In South Africa, where I lived for a few years as a young man, the tribal system was still working. Grandparents in a village looked after the children and educated them while the parents went out to the cities to work and send money back. The kids were kind of communal and free range. They grew up knowing, respecting and loving their grandparents. This model is playing out all over the world and seems to be a good solution. But what of the ego, the trickiest of players? What of that? What of its stories and what we tell ourselves? Commonly in the West, we've been trained to think greed is God or good. We've increasingly been taught to believe that our interests should come before the herd. Look, I do believe that you have to look after yourself before you look after the next person. But I also believe that sometimes we have to act in unselfish ways too. It's a very fine balance. If you're fighting tooth and nail for your slice of the pie and to hell with everybody else, then you're probably a child of the 80s and 90s. My Chinese teachers told me an observation that they had made, which was a standard trope in Chinese children's TV of the 1970s. Pile of apples on table, Western child visitor in household, the biggest apple on top of the pile. Western child grabs biggest apple off the top of pile, cue giggling from Chinese children who would never presume to take the best one or go first. He, he, he. I bet that's not playing on the screens in Beijing these days. More likely, reruns of Dallas in an educational time slot. Learn about capitalism 101 and fratricide. The ego really gets its first boost in a family setting. If you decide to train your little ankle biters to be the next big swinging dicks of Wall Street, then so be it. I will try not to judge, because I tried to train my ankle biters to be not judgmental and to be kind. Just take a quick look back at The Wolf and remind yourself that was a true story. I know, because I was there. Just look at California and Australia in flames and our polar ice caps melting. And ask yourself if the massive rise of ego in our families and in our lives might just have anything to do with ego, with these problems. And of course, this is a very, very close cousin to greed. If you genuinely don't see the problem or connection, then you are the problem. It's down to us to help our children and our children's children to become better, more self-aware, kinder and less egocentric people. For the sake of our planet, it's time to act now.